Can a debt collection agency take my tax refund? Stay tuned, I'll explain that to you. My name is Jay, and welcome to Ask a Debt Collector. Now, I've been in the debt collection industry for over 15 years. I've done it all, from skip tracing to collecting to management, and I've owned 2 debt collection agencies. For the past 8 years, I've been the go-to guy for friends and family for questions regarding debt and credit, and now I want to be that person for you. If you have any questions, put them down in the comment section. I promise I'll answer those questions. Let's go. Okay, so I wish I would have done this video around January, February, before you guys got your taxes. But as I was actually driving here to work today, and I remember thinking of all the questions that people always ask me. And one of the questions that frequently came up was, can a debt collection agency garnish or take my tax refund? And I've always given the same answer. And I'll give that answer to you, but just stay tuned, okay? So the reality is this: as a debt collector, around tax season time, we are licking our chops. Can't wait till around that time span, right? Come March, April, and May, those 3 months, a lot of times for debt collection agencies, they're the biggest months. Why? Because people are getting their tax refunds, and then they're contacting collection agencies, the people who are trying to clean up their credit, and now they have a chunk, $1,000 to sometimes even $7,000 to $10,000, and they're looking at trying to clean up their credit. If you're wise, that's what you'll do with that money at that time spent. But nevertheless, as a debt collector, that's what we're doing. Now, I'm not going to admit, well, you know what? This is what I'll tell you. Come December, January, and February, for the most part, I worked at collection agencies where we would insinuate that there's a possibility that your taxes can be taken. But we wouldn't necessarily say that. I remember working at an agency where come January, we would always say, hey, the company's looking at issuing a 1099-C to the IRS with regards to tax purposes. And so I would get consumers, they would say, oh, so what are you going to do? You're going to take my taxes? And sometimes, now not me, now I've heard collectors, let me be very clear on this. I've heard collectors say something along the lines like, well, no, we're not going to take your, we're not going to take your tax refund. But if, let's say, for instance, you had a debt and they would say, okay, well, if you're expecting to get $5,000 back and you owe us $1,600, then what could happen is that $1,600 can offset your tax refund. And then they would have to, they would issue that money, and then it would stop if you had it. It was going to be direct deposit into your bank and would offset it, and they would send you the remaining amount. That's one thing that they would insinuate. Now, another thing they would say is we would issue a 1099-C, and obviously anybody who understands what the 1099-C is, then basically you have to include that on your tax return as earned income. Now, me personally, on my own personal thing, I always talk about Capital One. I had a Capital One credit card. I had it started out with $500 or $300 limit. I remember it took 3 years. I had a $300 limit. I always had it maxed out. And then I remember vividly, one day I was going to actually pay it all the way off. I had the $300. I was like, you know what? I'm going to pay the balance off. And I go to look online to pay it off. And that day they gave me a credit increase of $3,000, right? So like most people who get into debt, I figure, oh, I'm gonna just pocket this $300. Now I have $2,700. I end up buying furniture, buying a bunch of crap, and then I was maxed out at the $3,000 on that card, just barely paying the minimum payments and barely hanging above, floating above water. Eventually, like most people, I end up defaulting on that card. Now that was probably in around like 2009 or 2010. And I remember, going time and time through that thing. And I think around like 2015, I did my taxes. I didn't receive a 1099-C from the actual creditor in the mail. I didn't get anything from Capital One. I know that the account was never sent to collections because every time I looked, It was always with the original creditor. And for those of you who don't know, around 2008, when they had the housing situation and they were giving out those, bad loans and that ballooned up and a lot of people messed up, banks got very tight with who they would send their accounts to, because there were suits and a lot of stuff that transpired from that. And so at that time span, I remember, because I've been in the debt collection industry, getting credit card debt was very difficult to get it from original creditors. And so a lot of original creditors, Capital One, a lot of these banks were just keeping the debt. And so with my Capital One card, I think right before the statute of limitation was going to run out on there, I think before the 7-year statute of limitation, before, it's forgiven completely, they issued me a 1099-C to the IRS for that balance that was due. It was like $3,500 or something like that. And I remember I already filed my taxes, and then next thing you know, the IRS came at me, said, hey, you have earned income, another $3,500 from this card, and you have to pay basically taxes on that $3,500 as earned income. I think I had to pay like $700 or somewhere around that thing. I paid that and it was done. So that can happen from the original creditor a lot of times. But once that happens, the debt is forgiven, from my knowledge. So obviously contact your attorney and figure out what the laws are in your state. But the reality is your federal and state income taxes can be taken only by federal and state government agencies can take your tax refunds, right? And, obviously if you owe on stuff like federal and state back taxes, you can get your tax refund taken back. If you owe on child support, they can take your taxes, and those of you who own child support, you know that. And then if you owe on federal student loans, they can take your taxes to pay that back, right? But private companies as well as individuals, they cannot take your tax refund. So if you're dealing with the collection agency and the collection agency is insinuating that they're going to garnish or they're going to offset your tax refund or take your tax refund for payment of a debt, which is like a credit card or auto deficiency loan or something along those lines, they can't do it. So if they're threatening to do that, don't worry about it. They're not able to do so. But if you do owe on any of those things that I stated before, your income, your state and federal income taxes can be intercepted, obviously, by only state and federal agencies. They are the only ones that can do that. Private debt collection agencies as well as individuals. I know that there are people out there that'll sue you for 10 grand, because of whatever happened on a private situation. They get a judgment. They can't actually take that money from you. Now, I have seen, now obviously in every state is different, but I have seen, I think, where a person, if I'm not correct, I think this is what happened. This was told to me, but I'm not sure. But I think a person I remember I worked at an agency that had a judgment against a specific person. They waited till around tax season to do a bank levy. So the person got their money. The money was deposited into the account. The bank levy came around that time span. They were able to get the money. Now, I'm not sure from what I remember, because this was so long ago. This was like in 2004 or 5. I think that consumer actually fought our agency, because it wasn't me particular, but it was in our legal department. I think they fought because they weren't, they said, hey, yeah, they did a bank levy, but it was my tax refund that was in that account. And I think they were able to prove that and able to get the money back. I'm not sure how that went. I didn't even pay attention to it after that circumstance. That's the only time, but in 15 years of doing this, I know collection agencies can't do that. So if they're threatening to do that, don't worry about it. They're not going to be able to do that. Now, if you owe on child support, if you owe student loans, if you owe back taxes, then yes, that can offset your tax refund. Now, if you have any other questions regarding debt or credit, put them down in the comment section. I promise I'll answer those questions. Be sure to like and subscribe to this YouTube channel for more content. And as always, you be great.